On today's episode of the Gripe Session, we are going to retort to one of my good friends, Dustin Brohm, and his thing about designations in regards to, I don't even remember what the heck he posted, but this turns into a real retort gripe session, so I hope you enjoy it for today.
It's Gripe Session time with your host, George Wanaka.
It's about nothing.
Discussing everything from real estate, current events, a little bit of everything, and the annoying little things that just tick you off.
You can't handle the truth.
What? You didn't know?
Here's your host, George Wanaka.
Your ass better call somebody.
What's up, everybody? How we doing today? Welcome to today's edition of the Gripe Session. Happy New Year, 2020. You know, I thought back when I was a kid, I thought by the time 2020 came, they'd have like flying cars. And I mean, granted, we do have things like, you know, cell phones, which are like the old Star Trek communicators nowadays, and you talk to Siri and all of those wonderful things. And now she just turned on, so I got to turn her off. There you go. And you'd think we'd have a little bit more stuff, but, you know, it's, you know, progress takes time, you know. And by the way, why would you want to rush things anyway? I mean, after all, once the robots take over, we're pretty much all done for. But anyway, I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to the podcast today. For those of you that do not know my name, and why should you? My name is George S. Wanaka. I am your host of The Gripe Session. For people listening for the first time, this podcast is meant to have some fun. I am a realtor in New York, Staten Island, New York. I am an appraiser also in Staten Island, New York, and in Brooklyn as well as a licensed mortgage broker. I am also a coach. I am also when I mean by a coach, I try to help agents and mentor them through some of the fun facts of our business. But I'm also, in the same breath, a coach for baseball, basketball, and I like to coach my kids and again, and coach in my community. So that's just a little bit about me. But today, I really wanted to retort a friend of mine's podcast that I listened to yesterday. And normally, I don't like to be the negative or the reverse on somebody's podcast in particular or something that they put out. But you see, Dustin took it a little bit too far. And he probably didn't realize that he did it, or knowing Dustin, he probably realized exactly what he was doing. But it was that inner voice that he has. And they just said, I'm talking about Wanaka. This is all Wanaka. So when he described the person in his podcast, he said George and designations. And he put those two things together. And Dustin likes to break my chops and say that I'm Mr. NAR, which is not really necessarily the case. But it's a private joke that we have going back and forth. But I digress. So let me get into the crux of this report, of this podcast today. So Dustin on his podcast, Massive Agent Podcast. Why am I even shouting him out when I'm retorting him? I don't understand what I'm doing here, but okay. We'll just keep going. We'll just push through this thing, and you're along for the ride, ladies and gentlemen. So enjoy the journey. But so Dustin on his podcast proceeded to talk a little bit about things that are a little bit overblown in the next decade. And one of the things that Dustin had discussed particularly was designations and the fact that we have a lot of my colleagues and myself have gotten these designations from NAR, which is the National Association of Realtors. And what's the purpose of these designations, for those of you that might know or might not know, is that it's the intent is to give you as an agent more education in order for you to be able to give more value to your clients, right? That's really what the goal is. Sorry, I needed some water there. So, that being said, there's positives and negatives to pretty much anything that you can do. And there could be a naysayer to even doing this, even doing these podcasts. I've had people come up to me at times and say, oh, wow, you're doing a podcast. Why? And quite frankly, there's a lot of reasons why, and I've gotten to it in some of my previous podcasts, and I don't want to go back over that, but it's more of a legacy thing for me down the road. But going back into the whole designation thing, one of the things that I somewhat agree with Dustin on is his point to when he speaks about every year you need to repay money to have letters behind your name. So as an example, I am an ABR, which is an accredited buyer's representative. I am a GRI, which is a graduate of the Real Estate Institute. I am a CRS, which my dad actually holds that too because he can't remember stuff. You thought the Rated R Realtor was going to go there, but I didn't today. It really stands for Certified Residential Specialist. Can't remember stuff, but that's a whole nother story. And there's a lot of other designations that are out there, E-Pro, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the things is, in order to be able to use those designations, you essentially have to pay dues in order to do that. Now, where Dustin has a valid point is, and Dustin and I have gone 15 rounds about it, and I do see his point, at least in that regard, is I have this knowledge already. I've sat through the classes. I have gone through the test taking in some cases to earn this designation. However, I'm not able to use something I've earned unless I pay somebody a VIG, as he likes to call it, or some other people like to call it, a VIG every single month, or every year, excuse me, because they are yearly. And quite frankly, he has a point. One of the things he said is, listen, if they were out there showing the consumers or demonstrating to consumers the benefits or the higher education that these designations hold, then you have a different conversation, because it's, you're the public that right now has no idea what some of these designations actually mean. They have no idea as to this. You see how that's how life works out. I literally just had to stop this podcast for 5 minutes because Dustin, I believe, heard that we were talking about him on this podcast, because his ears must have been ringing all the way out there in Salt Lake City, Utah. And he decided to call me back right now when I was recording this for you all. So anyways, it was good to talk to him anyway. But I told him I was doing this podcast as an ode to Brohm, to Bromy. So, but going back into as we're talking about these designations, one of the things that my retort to this is, while I definitely agree with parts of the paying these dues for these designations, because I would personally like to see more education to the public, and granted, there are always some politics within associations as to the reasoning why these things can't be put out there on a greater scale, and I get that. Might not like it, but I get it. The better part of these designations, though, however, comes back to the same conversation that we always like to have, which is the education, right? So the education that comes from these designations is things that I have been putting into my business over the last 27 plus years of doing this. I have used some of the techniques. I have used some of the strategies. I have used an exorbitant amount of things in here, and even things to going into class with people and listening to what they have used and been able to pick and choose things. So I believe that the designation while we can argue the conversation about the paying every year to use those 3 letters behind the name, I think the educational component behind it really sets in what a successful realtor has the potential to be. Now, do I think it's the end-all, be-all, say-all? No, I don't. Not necessarily. Because the same way that I met a lot of the Snap Pack and the people from REM, I believe that people that want to be educated, that want to bring value to their clients, that want to continuously put things together and put deals together and be on the cutting edge of the industry are going to do just that. They're going to go out and look at the new technology. They're going to go out and look at the new strategies. They're going to go out and look to see how is business changing every day. So I subscribe to education. We can get into a philosophical debate as to having letters behind your name, which I have, I want to say 6 or 7 letters or designations behind my name. Sometimes I have more letters behind my name than I have in my name. But the fact remains is the educational component is there. I might agree, and quite frankly, I do agree a little bit to the fact that the people that have to educate the public are the ones that have this knowledge or obtain this knowledge through their dues and their paying for the education, et cetera, et cetera. And I do definitely agree with parts of that. However, I still have that education, whether I made the decision not to say, I'm not going to give you my $100 a year or whatever that number happens to be. That knowledge does not go away. And that to me is more important than any letters behind my name, or any of the things that go associated with that. So I just wanted to throw that out there today as a retort to my friend Dustin. And yes, Dustin is my friend. We like to break each other's chops. The best part about social media, and I've said this a number of different times, is a lot of people that I have met through social media have become mentors, have become good friends, and I've met some of these people once, twice, ever, as long as you're being real. I have a guy who I ran into on Instagram, and we basically do the same workout program, and he's almost like my accountability partner. So it's amazing how these mediums nowadays, and again, audio to me is one of the next mediums that's out there. So that's part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast. Again, learning, educating. That's to me part of what I want my legacy to be, is to do things that nobody else is doing. And then down the roads, people will look back and go, oh, one of the first people that was doing this was George. But by the way, George was not the first person doing this. I copy a lot of my stuff off of other people, right? It's you can't get enough content on your own. You've got to listen to other people and what are other people doing and how are they doing it. And that, quite frankly, is some of the stuff that I've done. There's no golden ticket, if you will. It's just nothing more than hard work and perseverance. So that's what I'm going to leave you with today. I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to this podcast today, this special edition of the Gripe Session. We will be coming with more episodes very, very shortly. And I want to thank you once again. Keep on listening to this podcast. And if you would be so kind to give me a rate and review. If you found any value to this podcast whatsoever, go to that iTunes subscription and click on that rate and review. And we would appreciate a 5-star, or just give me a little bit of a heads up of stuff that you'd like to see. And I would definitely greatly appreciate that. Feedback is something that I always look forward to. Also, if you want to reach out to me on any of the social mediums, please do so at the Gripe Session Podcast on Instagram as well as Facebook. And with that being said, we will talk to you on the next edition of the Gripe Session. Thanks for listening. You have a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Gripe Session. Please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram.